Welcome everyone to Leaf Status Report for October 31st, 2025. Today, I've managed to simulate the NHL regular season 3,616 times. I was able to tack on a whole bunch of extra simulations today because I managed to implement multi-threading. So I've gone from working on only one core to working on 10. Naturally, the extra overhead does mean that simulating one batch of 10 takes on average about 23 seconds, whereas simulating a batch working on one core takes a bit under 10. But luckily, because one batch of 10 simulates 10 seasons at a time, the aggregate average time per season is like 2.3 seconds. So I've increased my efficiency by almost fivefold. Now, as I mentioned, the Leafs did not play a game yesterday, but there were five teams that were worth keeping an eye on. Um, I calculated the expected number of wins and the expected number of points in the standings. I actually did that before I released yesterday's edition, and I forgot to add it. I promise I will do that this time. Uh, Overall, though, we expected about 2.4 wins and about 5.39 points in the standings across those five teams to watch. What we ended up with instead was 3 wins and 7 points in the standings. Even more unfortunate was the fact that the 3 wins and subsequently 6 of those 7 standings points came from the 3 of those 5 teams that were the closest to the Leafs in the expected points standings. So we are again seeing consistent downward trends across the board in today's projections compared to yesterday. Another thing I really should have been doing sooner was giving expected points totals to 2 decimal places instead of one, because I keep giving the changes to two, and for some reason I've kept the overall changes limited to one. Anyway, we'll start doing that now. Yesterday, the Leafs had 93.32 expected points, and today they're down to 93.04. So that is a loss of 0.28 expected points. Because the Leafs didn't play a game yesterday, we can break that down to only 2 factors. The first of these factors is feeding all of yesterday's game data into today's simulations, which led to a loss of 0.1 expected points. And the other 0.18 expected points lost are due to randomness factors in the model. Good news, everyone. I have a histogram now. This is a compilation of every single result that the Leafs achieved in a simulation today. So, as we can see, the minimum number of points the Leafs scored in the season today was 65, and the maximum number of points they managed to score was 118. That gives us an effective range of 53 points. On the other hand, another metric that we're going to be considering going forward is the standard deviation of this data set. From now on, any team, specifically in the Eastern Conference, that's within one standard deviation of the Leafs' expected points is going to be considered in active points contention with them. The standard deviation of the Leafs' performances today is 7.8 points in the standings, which is going to leave a lot of Eastern Conference teams in that window. The Leafs made the playoffs in 60.8% of all simulations today. That is a 2.7% drop from yesterday when they made the playoffs in 63.5% of all simulations. Most of this probability drop comes from more the fact that the Penguins, the Red Wings, and the Senators closed that gap upwards rather than the Leafs' slight loss in points causing them to fall ridiculously far downwards. Consulting the table, the Leafs are still projected to finish third in the Atlantic Division. They now sit 9.01 expected points behind the division leaders, 0.81 expected points behind second in the Atlantic, still held by the Montreal Canadiens. They now sit only 1.22 expected points ahead of the Detroit Red Wings after their win last night, and they now only sit 2.83 expected points inside the playoffs. That window has been gradually narrowing as the days go on, and the Leafs do need to pick up a couple core wins or perhaps hope that those three teams directly below them start going on some losing streaks in order to keep themselves, especially in the division, but perhaps more importantly, simply inside the playoff ranges. Now, luckily, the game that's already going on as I'm recording this doesn't have any important teams to focus on. However, the two games in the NHL that haven't started yet have two or perhaps three teams out of those four that we should be keeping a close eye on. The if there is the Washington Capitals. They're playing the New York Islanders at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, the Capitals are within that one standard deviation range, but they're also in the Metropolitan Division, and most of the time they finish ahead of the Leafs. Both of them are in division spots, and thus they're not actually in direct contention. Nonetheless, if we take the rule that we're going plus or minus one standard deviation, they are a team to watch for. Um, the on the other side of things, just barely in that one standard deviation range below the Leafs, we have the New York Islanders. Um, Again, they are playing the Washington Capitals. I think the ideal result of that game is the Washington Capitals winning, preferably by a larger margin. The very, very important team to watch today, though, by far the most important, is the Detroit Red Wings. Obviously, that expected points gap of 1.22 could easily close if the Detroit Red Wings win today, and especially if they win by a commanding margin. They are playing the Anaheim Ducks, so they are favored to win. I also, before I forget, did already run the probabilities on these games. Specifically, I'm compiling the probabilities for the Red Wings and the Islanders, since they're really the two teams we need to worry about chasing down the Leafs from below. Uh, Overall, the between the Red Wings and Islanders, we're looking at about 0.94 expected wins, so essentially one of those two teams winning, and about 2.12 expected points in the standings.